So in our last video, we took a look at whether or not two given functions were inverses, but now I want to just give you a function and have you determine the inverse yourself. And the process is actually quite easy. So the process is pretty straightforward. Essentially, I'm replacing x with y and y with x and solving for my new y, and then just writing it as the inverse. So I'm going to do this example with you, and then on the next slide we're going to just verify that they are in fact inverses of one another. So remember that f of x is the same thing as y, so just think of it as y. So when I'm doing this question, I'm going to replace y with x, so now it's x equals 1/3, instead of x I write y, minus 6. And then from here, remember, I'm just solving for a variable. So I'm solving to get y by itself. So I start on the same side as y. I'm going to add 6 to each side. So I get x plus 6 on the left, on the right 1/3 y. And then I want just one y because I want it to be y equals. So again, I'm going to take this times 3 and this times 3. And notice that I'm writing the x plus 6 in parentheses, so that I remember that the whole left side of my equation is multiplied by 3. So that gives me 3x plus 18 equals 1/3 times 3 is 1, so it's just 1y. So I'm going to write my answer as f inverse of x equals 3x plus 18. So I've got my original function, I've got my inverse function. Now let's see if I did the math right and if they're actually inverses of one another. So again, here's my two solutions from before, my original equation and my new inverse. So I'm going to take f of f inverse of x, and hopefully I get x when I'm all done. So this would be f of 3x plus 18. So I'm just replacing f inverse of x with the function that is the inverse. And then I'm going to take f of that, meaning I'm going to take 1/3, and instead of x, 3x plus 18 minus 6. 1/3 of 3x is just 1x. 1/3 of 18 is 6. And then I see that I do in fact end up with x. So now let's do it in the opposite direction. F inverse of f of x. Remember, I'm going to replace f of x with the function that is f of x, 1/3 x minus 6. Now I'm replacing x in this function, so 3 instead of x, I'm replacing it with 1/3 x minus 6 plus 18, and then solving. So 3 times 1/3 is 1. 3 times minus 6 is minus 18. I still have that plus 18. Those two cancel, and I end up with x. So I end up with x both times. So did I do my math right? Yes, I did, because they are inverses of one another. Last one, go ahead and find the inverse of this function, f of x equals 3x plus 2. You don't need to check it, just find the inverse for me. When you're done, press play to see how you did. So again, I'm going to remember this is y, and I'm going to just write x equals 3y plus 2. So now I'm just going to solve for y. So let's subtract 2 from each side. So I get x minus 2 equals 3y. I need to divide by 3. So I'm going to divide the right side by 3, but on the left side, you can choose to write it two different ways. I prefer, and I prefer for you as well, to write the divided by 3 on each term, because otherwise I end up with x minus 2 over 3 as a fraction, and quite often, especially in ALEX, which is where you'll be putting your answers, they will want you to separate that out. So it's easier to just go straight to this format. And so this is x over 3, this is 2/3, this side is just y. So my final answer would just be the inverse of f of x is x divided by 3, or keep in mind I can also write that as 1/3 x minus 2/3. So that would be my final solution.